Tonight we are at Hedeby, a Viking trading harbour that claims it is calm at night and then immediately proves it is lying. There are no raids, no heroic unalivings, and no grand battles. Just wet rope, stubborn fog, damp cloth, picky coin scales, and a warehouse that sighs like it pays taxes. Follow Rowan the dock worker, Edric the scribe, Aelin the weaver, Bram the ship chandler, Osric the coin man, and Thane the warehouse master as they fight the true enemy of trade, weather, delays, and cargo that refuses to behave. If you like calm sarcasm, gentle tension, and the soft drama of people trying to keep grain from turning into a personality, you are in the right place. Chapter 1. Night Tide at Hedeby. Hedeby at night liked to pretend it was resting. The lamps along the harbour made small warm circles on the wet planks. The circles did not reach far, which felt honest. Beyond them, the water of the Schlei moved in slow folds, dark and patient, like a blanket that refused to stay tucked in. The air smelled of smoke, tar, and damp wood. It was the kind of smell that clung to a person and followed them home, so their bed would also know they had been working. The town behind the docks hummed softly, doors shut. A dog barked once and then reconsidered. Somewhere a late laugh rose and faded, as if someone remembered the hour and decided to keep their joy modest. Out beyond the town the Danevirke lay in the darkness, an earthwork that did its job by refusing to move. People spoke of it like it was a stern guardian. It did not answer. It simply stayed. The weather also stayed, which was less helpful. Rowan Ashby walked the dock line with a coil of rope on his shoulder. His boots thudded on the boards in a steady rhythm. He was not trying to be dramatic. The dock provided enough drama on its own. Rope was honest work. You pulled it, you tied it, you trusted it, and sometimes it punished you for thinking trust was free. He stopped by a mooring post and checked a knot with 2 fingers. The rope was damp and rough. The knot held. Rowan nodded once, like a man approving another man in a quiet contest. The boat beside the post creaked softly, a sound that suggested it would like a new dock worker assigned, preferably one who never slept. A gull cried overhead. The gulls of Hedeby sounded offended by the concept of night. Rowan did not look up. If you looked up too often at the harbour, something would go wrong behind you. The harbour noticed attention and used it as an invitation. From the shed that served as a ship chandler shop, Bram Holt stepped out under the eaves. Bram wore a hood and the expression of a man who had just discovered someone else had made a decision about his property. Bram dealt in necessities, rope, tar, lamp oil, spare pegs, and the quiet certainty that nothing ever stayed where you put it. Bram held up pine hand and pointed at the dock, as if accusing it directly. "The dock has eaten 3 coils of my rope," he announced. Rowan gave the dock a slow look, like he was waiting for the dock to deny it. "The dock has expensive tastes," Rowan replied. Bram moved closer, boots splashing lightly in shallow puddles. He had the careful step of someone who knew where the boards were worst. "I did not sell it," Bram added. "I did not lend it. It has simply gone on a long walk and I expect it will return with new opinions." Rowan glanced toward the line of boats. "If it returns tied into something embarrassing, you may charge the embarrassment a fee." Bram gave a tired snort that almost counted as laughter. A lamp flame bent sideways as the wind pushed through. It was not a storm. It was just the weather reminding the harbour that it could, at any time, make every task take longer. Down the dock, near the toll post, Osric Penn had set up his small table beneath a lamp. Osric carried his coin scales like a man carrying a fragile truth. He did not hurry, he did not waste motion. His hands were steady, his gaze steady, and his patience had the hard edge of a sharpened weight. Beside Osric, Edric Vale hunched over a writing board. Edric was the toll scribe, the keeper of lists and the guardian of ink. His hair was neatly tied back, his sleeves were neat, his quill moved in tidy strokes that made the world look more orderly than it actually was. A trader stood opposite Osric, shifting as if he could shake extra weight into his coins. Osric placed a small piece of silver in the scale pan. The beam tilted. He added a weight. The beam steadied. He waited until it was still, because the scale deserved respect. 3 small coins and 1 clipped edge, Osric said. The trader lifted his chin. That edge is not clipped. That edge is artistic. Osric looked at the scale beam as if consulting a wiser friend. The scale does not appreciate art, he replied. Edric did not look up. His quill continued, scratching softly. The sound was like a tiny animal digging a tunnel through responsibility. Rowan approached the toll post and rested his hands on the edge of the table for a moment. "We have a late boat coming in," he said. "Tide is good now, but the wind is turning." Edric raised his eyes briefly, the way a person might glance at a stain forming on a clean shirt. "Late boat," he repeated, as if the words were a personal inconvenience. Bram leaned closer to Rowan and murmured, "Now the real work begins, writing about the work." Rowan kept his face calm. "I need a second set of hands at the far post," Rowan said, mostly to Osric. Osric did not move. "I have 2 hands and both are currently employed," Osric replied. Edric lifted his quill slightly. "I have ink." Rowan stared at the quill. "Ink does not tie knots." Edric looked offended in a quiet way. He was not offended often, but when he was, he made it look refined. From the warehouse doorway, Thane Mercer appeared. Thane was the warehouse master. He stood in the light like a man who could smell damp cloth from across a town. His shoulders were broad, his face was calm, his eyes were always doing inventory. "Late boat," Thane said. "What kind?" "Mixed cargo," Rowan answered. "Timber, saltfish, cloth, maybe small barrels of ale if the crew believes in good choices." Thane nodded. "If it is cloth, it goes hides. If it is fish, it goes away from the cloth. If it is ale, it goes away from Edric." Edric finally looked up. "I can hear you." "Good," Thane replied. "Then the system works." The wind pushed again, the lamp flame hissed. Water slapped softly against hulls. Hedeby was not quiet at night, not truly. It simply lowered its voice so it could listen for problems. Rowan headed down toward the far post. Bram followed because Bram complained while helping, which was still helping. They walked along boards that shone with moisture. The dock smelled like wet pine and old salt. Out on the dark water a lantern bobbed, growing larger. The late boat was coming in. Its lantern made a weak circle of light that shook with every ripple. The boat itself was a dark wedge against darker water. The crew were shapes in hoods, moving with the tired urgency of people who wanted land and warmth, and a bed that did not sway. Rowan positioned himself at the post and called out a warning about the current. His voice carried over the water and then sank into the night like a stone. The boat came in a little fast, not dangerous, but fast enough to suggest the helmsman had been arguing with the wind and wanted the argument to end. Rowan waited until the bow was close. A line came flying toward him. He caught it with both hands. The rope was wet and heavy, as if it had been soaking up complaints. He looped it around the post, pulled, and locked it into place. The boat tugged. The rope answered. The knot held, because Rowan had tied it like he meant it. Bram caught the next line and secured it, lips pressed tight with concentration and personal offence at the idea of labour happening in rain. The hull nudged the dock with a dull bump. Wood spoke to wood. The boat angled into position. A pole pushed, then another. The boat settled as if it had planned it that way all along. A crewman leaned over the gunwale. His face was half lit by the lantern and half hidden. "We are late," he called. Rowan stared at him, letting the obvious hang in the air. "Yes," he replied. The crewman blinked. It was not the scolding he had prepared for. Hedeby could scold, but Hedeby preferred efficiency. "What happened?" Rowan asked. "Wind, then calm, then wind again," the crewman answered. "Also a barrel decided to leak and now everything smells like fish even more than usual." "That is a talent," Rowan said. The crewman did not know whether that was praise. Rowan did not explain. The night moved on, unloading began. Sacks first, then crates, then bundled timber. The dock workers moved like a practiced machine, except machines did not stop to adjust hoods and rub cold hands. Rowan directed traffic with short gestures, pointing toward the warehouse door where Thane waited. Thane inspected each item as it crossed the threshold. He did not poke for the joy of poking. He did it because moisture was a quiet thief. It stole value, it stole time, it stole sleep. Fish, Thane announced as a sack passed him. Fish is honest. Fish tells you what it is immediately. A crate came next, marked with a small, careful symbol meant to suggest fragility. Thane rested his palm on the crate and listened to the sound of its contents shifting. "This crate is lying," he said. The crewman stepped forward. "It is glass." "Then it should be packed like glass and not like stubborn wood," Thane replied. "It survived the whole journey," the crewman insisted. "Many people survive foolishness," Thane answered. "It does not make it a good plan." Rowan almost smiled. He did not, because the harbour would take that as encouragement. Edric arrived at the warehouse threshold with his writing board tucked under his arm. Osric followed, carrying the scale kit wrapped in cloth. Edric stayed just far enough from the damp to preserve his dignity. Osric stayed close enough to preserve the truth. Edric began asking questions. Name of the boat, origin, cargo list, intended buyers. The crew answered in short phrases. Edric wrote in steady strokes. His handwriting looked calm even when the world was wet and loud. Osric weighed toll silver. The scale beam lifted and settled. Weights clicked softly. One crewman offered a coin that looked full at first glance and optimistic at second glance. Osric placed it in the pan, set a weight, and waited. The beam tilted. The truth leaned. "The coin is light," Osric said. The crewman tried a smile. "It is only a little light." "Like dawn." Osric looked at him with quiet patience. "Dawn is not a unit of weight." The crewman sighed and produced another coin. As the cargo moved, the wind shifted colder. The lamp flames bent. A loose board rattled somewhere and then stopped, like it had made its point. Rowan lifted a bundle of timber with another dock worker. The wood was slick, leaving damp stains on his sleeves. He carried it inside and stacked it where Thane indicated, away from cloth, away from sacks that might swell. The warehouse smelled of straw and old wood and faint traces of spice that had passed through in better weather. A bundle of cloth came next, wrapped in outer fabric that already looked too wet. Thane watched it arrive like a man watching a child carry a bowl of hot soup across a crowded room. "High," he ordered. "Keep air around it." Rowan nodded and helped move the bundle onto a higher shelf. He could feel damp through the wrap. Damp was always eager to travel. Edric finished one sheet of notes and began another. His ink thickened slightly in the cold. He frowned and warmed the ink pot in his hands like it was a small stubborn creature that needed encouragement. Bram drifted near the doorway, watching the unloading with the air of a man counting losses. A coil of rope lay near his boot. It was not of his couriers, but it was rope. Bram looked at it the way a person might look at a stray animal that had decided to follow them home. "That is not my rope," Bram muttered. Rowan glanced at it. "Congratulations, you have adopted rope." Bram sighed. "I will feed it tar and disappointment." The late boat crew moved slower as the urgent part ended. Their shoulders dropped. Their hands worked in a steadier rhythm. Relief entered their movements, quiet and practical. Willa Crow appeared on the dock, running as if the rain behind her was trying to catch up. Willa was an errand runner, a message carrier, and a collector of information. She heard everything. She repeated only what amused her or what was useful, and sometimes those were the same. She stopped near Rowan, breathing hard and smiling. "Thane wants you at the far warehouse door," she said. "The latch is sticking again. Also, Edric wants to know if you can spell the boat name without using your hands." Rowan wiped rain from his forehead. "Tell Edric I spell with rope." Willa grinned. "I will tell him you are illiterate in a dignified way." She ran off before anyone could hand her more problems. Rowan and Thane went to the far warehouse door. The latch had swollen. Wood drank moisture and then acted surprised when it swelled. Rowan set his shoulder and pushed. The door groaned like it had been asked to make a moral decision. Inside, Thane stood with arms folded, watching the cargo flow like a man watching children in a market. Calm, sharp, and entirely unimpressed. "Good," Thane said. "It opens. Now make it close again and pretend it was always that way." Rowan pushed it shut. The latch caught with a reluctant click. For a moment the warehouse felt sealed against the wind. The warmth inside held a little better. Thane let out a quiet breath he would never call relief. "That boat brought cloth." Rowan looked at the stacks. "Does it look decent? It looks damp. Everything looks damp." Thane moved closer to the bundles, gaze narrowed. "Yes, but cloth remembers." Rowan knew it was true. Wet cloth held grudges. It soured, it spotted, it lost value, and then everyone acted surprised, as if moisture was a new invention. "We will get it to the weavers," Rowan said. Thane nodded once. "Tell Ilin Brooke, she can make wet behave if you do not mind her commentary." Rowan felt a small tired amusement. "I have survived commentary before." "Then you are qualified for this town," Thane replied. Later, when the last sack was stacked and the last note was written, the harbour softened into its night shape again. Edric packed his parchment carefully. Osric wrapped his weights and scales. Bram returned to his shed, muttering to his shelves as if they could apologise. Rowan stood at the edge of the dock and looked out at the inlet. The late boat was tied, calm now, rocking gently. The lamps trembled in the wind. The water moved in slow, dark folds. Hedeby was not at the edge of the world, not truly, but it liked the drama of distance. It liked to imagine itself as the last warm place before endless dark water and colder skies. Rowan rubbed his hands together, feeling the ache in his fingers. Tomorrow there would be more ropes, more lists, more crates that lied about what they were, and more weather making sure everyone remembered who was in charge. He turned toward home, not in triumph, not in defeat, just in the steady way a dock worker turned when a shift ended and the night accepted it. Chapter 2. The Rope and the Rain. Rain arrived in Hedeby with the confidence of a person who had never been refused entry. It began as a fine mist and then became a steady curtain. The harbour lamps dimmed behind the falling water, their circles of light shrinking, as if the night was pulling its cloak tighter. Rowan returned to the docks after a short rest that barely counted as sleep. His bones felt less angry, but his mind still carried the rhythm of rope and water. The boards under his boots were slick. The air smelled of wet wood and smoke and the sharp bite of salt. Bram Holt stood under the eaves of his shed, staring at his shelves like they had personally insulted him. A small pile of rope coys lay on the bench. Bram was counting them with the grim focus of a man doing arithmetic he did not enjoy. "The dock has returned, Goyle," Bram announced as Rowan approached. Rowan leaned in. "That is generous." Bram picked up the coil and let it sag slightly in his hands. Water dripped from it. It returned it wet and with a knot that suggests someone learned rope from a tragic song. Rowan examined the knot. It was brave and incorrect. He untied it with a quick twist. "This knot has ambition," Rowan said. Bram frowned. "Ambition is not a useful quality in rope." A gust pushed Rain sideways. The shed roof rattled softly. The Schlei beyond was a moving sheet of dark texture. Boats bobbed at their moorings and creaked, as if they had opinions about moisture and were ready to share them. Rowan walked the dock line, checking posts and lines. Wet rope tightened differently. A knot that held yesterday could slip today, if someone had tied it with hope instead of skill. Rowan tested each line with a steady pull, feeling for the slight give that meant trouble later. At the warehouse door, Thane Mercer waited, hood up, arms crossed, staring at the sky like it owed him a personal favour. "We have damp cloth," Thane said when Rowan reached him. Rowan glanced inside. The warehouse smelled heavier today, as if the damp had moved in and brought furniture. "We had damp cloth yesterday," Rowan replied. "Yesterday it was damp," Thane said. "Today it is ambitious." Rowan stepped inside. The cloth bundles from the late boat sat on a high shelf, but even there the air felt wet. Straw on the floor had darkened, moisture crept into corners like a quiet thief. "Get Elin Brooke," Thane said. "Now." Rowan nodded. He had been expecting this. Cloth was valuable. Cloth was delicate. Cloth was the kind of cargo that could turn a good week into a sour wa if you treated it like lumber. Rowan headed into town through the rain. Hedeby at night was dim and close. Water streamed off roof edges. Mud collected near doorways. People moved with shoulders hunched, not because of fear, but because rain made everyone look like they were carrying secrets. Elin Brooke worked in a warm building that smelled of wool, dye and smoke. The glow from inside painted the rain outside a softer colour. Rowan pushed the door open and stepped into heat that felt like a personal kindness. Elin looked up from her loom, her hands paused mid-motion. Her face held calm humour, the kind that did not shout. "You look like a man who has been kissed by the weather and regretted it," she observed. "The warehouse cloth is wet," Rowan replied. Elin let out a long, patient breath. "Of course it is." She reached for a cloak and wrapped it around her shoulders with practiced speed. "Tell Thane to stop breathing on it," she said. "Sometimes damp is encouraged by worry." "Thane worries professionally," Rowan said. "Then he should charge the weather a fee," Elin replied. They walked back through the rain. Elin did not hurry in a frantic way. She moved in a steady way that made urgency look civilized. Rowan appreciated that. Panic was loud. Quiet urgency actually worked. At the warehouse, Elin stepped inside, eyes scanning the stacks, the straw, the way the air clung to the beams. She reached out and pressed her palm against a cloth bundle. Then she smelled the wrap and nodded once. "Not sour yet," she said. "The cloth is still hopeful." "Cloth can be hopeful?" Rowan asked. "Everything can be hopeful if it has not met enough people," Elin replied. Thane stood nearby, arms still crossed, trying to look like he was supervising and not worrying. "Can you save them?" he asked. "Yes," Elin answered, "but it will involve work." Thane blinked slowly. "I expected that." "Good," Elin said. "Then you will not be disappointed. Disappointment is also damp." Elin began giving instructions. She asked for braziers, she asked for dry straw, she asked for space between stacks so air could move. She had Thane open a vent high in the wall to let warm air rise out, drawing fresh air through without inviting the rain in. Rowan and 2 dock workers moved bundles carefully, lifting them onto planks to keep them off the floor. Elin checked each bundle, choosing which needed attention first. Her face remained calm, but her hands moved fast. Bram appeared at the doorway, peering in as if damp might also steal his inventory from across the room. "If you need rope," Bram called, "I have rope." "If the harbour has not eaten it again," Rowan looked at him. "We may need rope to hang cloth for airing." Bram took a step in, then stopped as the damp air touched him. "I will bring rope. I will not bring feelings." Elin glanced toward Bram. "Bring rope. Leave your sorrow outside." Bram nodded like a man taking orders from someone who had earned them. As Rowan helped move a bundle, a runner slipped through the doorway. Willa Crow stood dripping rain, eyes bright, breath quick. "Edric is looking for you, Rowan," she said. "He has a page missing and he believes it is a tragedy." Rowan felt his shoulders tighten. "A missing page." Willa nodded. "He says he cannot complete the toll record. He is standing near the toll post like a man who has been betrayed by paper." Elin spoke without looking up, hands still working. "Tell Edric that paper cannot betray him. It is too simple. People betray him." Willa grinned and darted away before anyone could hand her more tasks. Rowan finished moving the cloth bundles and then headed back toward the toll post. Rain tapped his hood. The harbour lamps hissed. Water ran in thin streams along the dockboards, gathering in puddles that reflected the trembling lights. Edric stood under the toll lamp with his writing board clutched tight. His face looked pale in the light. Osric was there too, calm as always, unpacking his scales as if a missing page was merely an interesting puzzle. Rowan approached. "What happened?" Rowan asked. Edric lifted dumb hand and his fingers shook slightly with indignation. "A page is missing," he said. "The page with the cargo notes from last night. The late boat, the cloth, the fish, the timber, all of it, gone." Rowan looked at the board. "Did you drop it?" Edric stared at him like Rowan had suggested Edric enjoyed dropping things. "I do not drop pages," Edric replied. "I place pages." Osric adjusted a weight in his kit, not because it needed adjusting, but because Osric liked to keep his hands busy when other people were dramatic. "Paper does not walk away by itself," Osric observed. Edric pointed toward the warehouse. "It must be there. It must have been carried in with the cargo notes. Then it was set down, then it was taken, by someone who does not respect order. Rowan rubbed rain from his brow. "We will find it," he said. "The page cannot have gone far." Edric looked at him with the desperation of a man whose power depended on ink. "If it is lost, we will have to rewrite from memory." Rowan gave him a steady look. "Memory is not your strongest cargo, Edric." Edric did not respond. He did not have to. His face did it for him. Osric closed the scale kit and nodded toward the warehouse. "We search where it could be, not where it feels dramatic." That was Osric in a sentence. Calm truth, no decoration. Rowan and Osric went back into the warehouse. Thane saw them and immediately looked defensive, as if missing paper was also moisture. "Edric has lost a page," Rowan explained. Thane exhaled slowly. "Paper, of course. Damp cloth I can fight, damp straw I can replace, but paper. Paper dissolves out of spite." Elin glanced up. "It dissolves because you keep breathing on it," she said. "Stop that." Thane looked mildly offended, then accepted it as accurate. Osric moved with careful steps, scanning the floor, the shelves, the planks where cloth had been moved. Rowan checked the edges of benches, the top of barrels, the places a page could slide when hands were full. A dock worker lifted a plank and looked beneath it. Nothing. Bram returned with rope and found the warehouse full of searching bodies. "What is this?" Bram asked. "A festival. A missing page," Rowan replied. Bram sighed. "Paper always goes missing when it would be useful. That is its nature." Aelin pointed toward a corner near the braziers. "If you leave paper near heat, it curls. If you leave it near damp, it softens. If you leave it near Edric, it becomes nervous." Rowan checked near the braziers anyway. He found a scrap of parchment, not the missing page, just a small torn note with ink smudged by moisture. Edric would have considered it a small insult. Osric crouched near a stack of timber. He ran his fingers along the floor and then held them up. A faint smear of ink. Osric looked at Rowan. Ink trail. Rowan followed Osric to the timber stack. Between two planks, a corner of parchment peeked out, bent and slightly damp. Osric slid it free with careful fingers. The missing page. Rowan took it and held it up. The ink had blurred in places but was still readable. The page had been wedged by accident, likely when someone had shifted timber and set the board down without thinking. The page had not been stolen, it had simply been treated like a thing that did not matter. Rowan looked toward the doorway where Edric stood hovering, unable to enter fully because of the damp. "Found it," Rowan called. Edric stepped forward fast enough to look undignified. He took the page with both hands and held it up to the lamplight as if checking whether it was still loyal. "It is damaged," Edric said in a strained voice. "It is alive," Rowan replied. "Which is more than some cargo can say after a week in this weather." Edric glared, but the glare did not stick. Relief softened his face. Osric returned to his table. "Now the toll record can be completed," he said, like the world had been restored to balance. Thane watched the page go and shook his head. So much concern for one sheet. Elin nodded toward the cloth bundles. One sheet can decide a fee. One cloth bundle can decide a season. Hedeby is built on fragile things pretending they are strong. That was true. It was also mildly exhausting. The rain continued. The braziers warmed the warehouse air. The cloth bundles slowly lost some of their damp ambition. Bram hung lengths of cloth on rope lines, careful to keep them from touching each other. He did it with the solemn focus of a man performing a duty he would deny enjoying. Rowan checked the dock again. A small boat had loosened slightly in the wind. He tightened the line. The knot held. The boat settled. The harbour kept breathing. Near midnight, Edric finished rewriting a few blurred words and finally looked less haunted. Osric packed his scales again. Thane adjusted the straw and closed the vent halfway as the wind shifted. Elin pulled her cloak tighter and looked at Rowan. "You see," she said, "no raids, no great disasters, just paper, damp, and people." Rowan nodded. "The worst kind of adventure." Elin smiled. "The kind that keeps the town alive." Rowan stepped back out into the rain. The harbour lamps trembled. The schlei moved in dark folds. Hedeby kept working, even when it pretended it was asleep. It always would. That was the deal it made with the water. Chapter 3. The Scales Do Not Care. Morning at Hedeby did not arrive with any ceremony. It seeped in, pale and damp, as if the sky had been awake all night and decided to share the mood. The rain had eased, but not left. It had merely stepped back and folded its arms, watching to see if anyone dared to feel dry. Rowan Ashby arrived at the dock before the gulls finished complaining. He checked the lines first, because boats did not care if you had not eaten, and the dock did not care if your boots were still wet from yesterday. The boards were slick, shining with a thin film of water that made every step feel like a small negotiation. A pair of dock workers were already hauling a cart of straw toward the warehouse, faces set in the serious expression of men performing the ancient ritual of trying to keep damp from winning. Thane Mercer had taught them that damp was not a condition. Damp was a personality. Damp came back. Damp remembered. Rowan tightened a line on a small cargo boat and then looked toward the toll post. Osric Penn had set up his table again. Cloth laid flat, scale kit opened with careful hands. Osric treated his tools like honoured guests. He did not slam things. He did not rush. He did not argue with gravity because gravity never argued back, it simply won. Edric Vale stood nearby with his board and ink, hair neat despite the weather, expression slightly bruised by the memory of a missing page. He was writing with the determination of a man who believed paperwork could form a shelter. Bram Holt came down the dock with a bundle of rope on his shoulder and a jar of tar tucked under his arm. He moved like a man delivering a peace offering to a hostile village. He saw Rowan and tipped his head. "The harbour has not eaten anything since you left," Bram observed. "Either it is improving or it is waiting." Rowan looked out over the inlet. "It is always waiting." Near the toll post, a trader approached Osric with a small pouch and a confident smile. The smile was the first clue that something was wrong. Honest people did not arrive smiling at coin scales. The trader set the pouch on the table and loosened the drawstring as if performing a generous act. Osric did not touch the pouch. He waited. The trader cleared his throat. "Good morning," he began, with the tone of someone offering a gift. Osric nodded once, the smallest greeting a person could legally give. Edric dipped his quill and waited, eyes half narrowed, ready to record whatever shape this problem took. The trader tipped the pouch. Silver coins spilled into the pan with a soft clink. The sound was pleasant, which was also suspicious. Pleasant sounds often meant someone was trying to distract you from unpleasant facts. Osric set the coins into two more pan of the scale and began placing weights in the other. He moved slowly, not because he was slow, but because haste was how people got away with things. The beam tilted, then steadied, then tilted again as Osric adjusted a weight. The trader spoke quickly. "These are good coins, full weight, proper silver, no tricks, as a man of fairness." Osric watched the beam settle. "The beam is not convinced," Osric replied. Edric wrote that down without looking up. He did not write it as a joke. He wrote it because it sounded like a principle, and Edric collected principles the way other men collected knives. The trader laughed, a warm laugh meant to make everyone relax. "Come now, perhaps the weights are wet." Osric glanced at the weights, dry and polished. "The weights are not wet," he replied. "The weights do not go outside in the rain unless they feel like it." The trader blinked, trying to decide whether he had been insulted by the weights or by Osric. This was the right kind of confusion. It kept people from making useful arguments. Rowan stepped closer, not to join the debate, but to be nearby in case it turned into a performance that needed a stage manager. The doc had taught him that people loved drama as much as they loved profit. Osric lifted a coin, held it between finger and thumb, and turned it toward the lamplight. "This edge is clipped," he said. The trader leaned in. "It is not clipped. It is worn. Many hands have held it." Osric nodded as if this were a touching story. "Many hands have held it, and then someone got hungry," he replied. Edric made a small sound in his throat, not quite laughter, more like a sentence escaping. He bent his head lower and wrote faster to hide it. The trader spread his hands. You are strict. Osric placed the coin back. The scale is strict, he said. I only work here. The trader tried a different angle, voice softer, as if sharing a secret. Perhaps there is another fee, he suggested, for the inconvenience of my time. Rowan watched Osric carefully. Osric did not change expression. He did not glare. He did not smile. His face remained calm, which made it clear he had already decided the answer. Osric closed the pouch gently and pushed it back. Your time is not a currency accepted at this table, he said. The trader stiffened. So you refuse me. Osric met his eyes. I refuse your coins as they are, he corrected. If you return with full weight, you will be welcomed by the beam. The trader scooped up the coins with a tight jaw and walked away, boots thudding harder than necessary. The dock workers pretended not to watch. People always watched, they simply learned to watch without moving their faces. Edric exhaled and adjusted his board. That was unnecessary, he murmured to Rowan, as if they were discussing weather. Rowan tilted his head. He tried to pay with optimism, Rowan replied. Osric does not accept optimism. Edric looked at the inkpot. If optimism could be measured, I would record it. Rowan said nothing. Edric did not need encouragement. Osric returned to his work, weighing the next set of coins from another boat crew, hands steady, eyes calm. The scale beam lifted and settled again and again, a small wooden line drawing hard truths in the air. Farther down the dock, Thane Mercer directed 2 workers moving sacks from a boat into the warehouse. His instructions were short, precise, and repeated with the patience of a man used to being ignored. Higher, he told them, off the floor. Air moves, damp follows air. One worker nodded and shifted the sack. The other worker grunted, a sound that meant agreement and also fatigue. Rowan walked toward the warehouse with a question that had been sitting in his mind since the late boat arrived. Thane, he told. Thane turned without surprise. He always seemed to know when someone wanted him, as if worry had given him extra hearing. The cloth from the late boat, Rowan said. How is it? Thane glanced up toward the high shelves. The bundles hung on rope lines now, suspended to let air move around them. Bram had rigged the lines with the careful resentment of a man keeping other people's wealth from turning into rag. It is not sour, Thane replied. It is not happy, but it is not sour. That is a victory, Rowan said. Thane nodded as if accepting praise on behalf of the warehouse, which was the only kind of praise Thane trusted. Elin is coming later, Thane added. She wants to check the fibers. She says damp leaves a memory. Rowan nodded. Cloth remembered. Wood remembered. Paper remembered. Hedeby itself remembered. It remembered every delay, every argument, every bad barrel. The only thing that did not remember was the weather, which repeated itself endlessly without learning. A shout rose from the far end of the dock. Not a panic shout, more like an irritated announcement. Rowan turned and saw a young dock worker holding up a small crate, water dripping from the seams. Rowan walked over. The worker pointed at the crate lid. It says dry goods, he reported, as if quoting a crime. Rowan leaned closer. A faint smell rose, not fish, not spice, something sour and sharp. That is not dry goods, Rowan said. The worker looked relieved that someone older had agreed with reality. It is leaking, he added. The bottom is wet. Rowan ran a finger along the seam and tasted the air. The smell was familiar in an unpleasant way. It smelled like pickling that had gone wrong. Thane arrived behind him, drawn by the word leaking like a moth to flame. Open it outside, Thane ordered. The worker pried the lid. Inside were small jars packed in straw. One jar had cracked. Liquid had seeped out, soaking straw and wood. The label on the jar was smeared, unreadable, which was a mercy. Bram appeared as well, because Bram appeared whenever something threatened to require supplies. What is it? Bram asked. Rowan lifted Don jar carefully. The liquid inside was cloudy. Bad preserving, Rowan said. Thane made a face. Bad preserving is a polite way to say it. Rowan set the jar back. What do we do? He asked. Thane looked at the crate like it had insulted his family. We keep it away from everything, Thane replied. We store it where it can be blamed properly. Outside, under cover, Away from cloth, away from grain, away from anything I like. Bram nodded. I can provide cover, Bram offered. For a fee, and for the pleasure of watching this crate suffer. Rowan glanced at him. You are very kind, Bram sighed. I am a ship chandler. Kindness is not in stock. But I have tar and a spare awning. They moved the crate to a covered corner near the warehouse exterior, where rain could reach it if it wanted, and no valuable cargo had to share air with it. The dock worker looked grateful to be done with it, as if the crate had been whispering threats. Edric arrived late, because Edric did not run unless ink was on fire. He stood at a safe distance and frowned at the crate. What is this? He asked. A problem that smells, Rowan replied. Edric grimaced. Must I record it? Thane looked at Edric with calm irritation. You record everything, Thane said. It is your talent and your burden. Edric glanced at his board. Then I will record it as a leaking crate of unhelpful goods, he said. Osric approached, having finished a round of toll weights, and looked at the jars. If it is for sale, it will not sell well, he observed. Bram nodded. If it is not for sale, it should still not exist. Elin Brooke arrived as promised, cloak damp, cheeks red from wind. She stepped into the warehouse and scanned the hanging cloth bundles. Her eyes moved like a practiced hand, fast and sure. Rowan watched her take in the scene, the rope lines, the braziers, the straw, the vent. She nodded once, approving. Not terrible, she said, which is high praise for a warehouse. Thane looked mildly proud, as if the warehouse itself had been complimented. Elin moved to a cloth bundle and pressed it gently between her fingers. It is still strong, she said. It will not fall apart because it got wet. It will complain forever. Rowan nodded. So it is like the gulls. Elin gave him a small smile. Like most of Hedeby, she corrected. She turned to the dock area and spotted the covered crate outside. That smells like regret, she noted. Bram raised a hand slightly. It is regret in jars. Elin did not go closer. Keep it away from dye, she warned. Bad smells get into everything, even people. Rowan glanced toward Osric. Osric will weigh the smell and declare it light, he said. Osric did not smile, but his eyes softened slightly, which in Osric language was laughter. The day moved on, wet and slow. Boats arrived in cautious intervals. Men shouted names, women carried baskets. Children ran and were told not to, then ran again. The harbour did what it always did, grinding trade into order through rope and ink and patience. As evening approached, the wind shifted again. The lamps were lit earlier than anyone admitted. A thin fog began to creep in off the water, low and quiet. Rowan stood near the toll post as Osric packed his weights. Osric, Rowan asked, do you ever get tired of weighing? Osric folded his cloth around the weights with care. No, he replied. The scales do not care about moods. That is comforting. Edric looked up from his board. I care about moods, he said. They ruin handwriting. Rowan looked out over the darkening inlet. Then you are both doomed, he replied. Osric closed the kit. Doomed is dramatic, he said. We are simply employed. Rowan could not argue with that. The harbour did not need heroics. It needed people who did not panic when rain showed up, or when coins tried to pretend they were heavier than they were. He walked the dock line once more before the night settled in. The boats creaked. The fog thickened slightly. The lamps trembled in the wind. Behind him, Hedeby continued, steady and stubborn, held together by rope, ink, and the quiet certainty that the scales would keep telling the truth, even if everyone else tried to bargain. Chapter 4. Cloth, Smoke, and Salt. Fog made Hedeby feel smaller. It softened edges and stole distance. The harbour lamps became pale halos, floating in a world that had forgotten its own shape. The water of the Schlei was hidden except for the gentle sound of it touching wood, a soft slapping that sounded like a patient reminder. Rowan arrived to find the dock wrapped in grey. He could see the nearest boats as darker shadows. Beyond them was nothing, only fog thick enough to make a person feel alone even while surrounded by the whole town. Willow Crow ran out of the fog like a rumour made solid. Her hood was up, her hair damp at the edges, her eyes bright. "You are needed," she said, not bothering with greetings. "The fog has opinions, and the boats are listening." Rowan gave her a tired look. "The boats always listen." Willa nodded. This listened too much. A crew missed their berth, and now they are pretending they meant to. Thane is collecting patience in a bucket, and it is not filling. Rowan walked with her, steps careful on slick boards. Somewhere nearby, someone coughed. Somewhere, a chain clinked. The fog turned every small sound into a warning. At the far end of the dock, a cargo boat sat at an awkward angle, its bow too close to a piling. 2 dock workers were pushing with poles while a crewman on the boat shouted directions that no one could see. Thane Mercer stood near the warehouse door, arms crossed, face calm in a way that suggested effort. Bram Holt was there too, holding a coil of rope and looking at the scene like a man watching a play with a weak plot. Edric Vale stood under a lamp, board tucked under arm, trying to keep ink from being eaten by damp air. Osric Penn was beside him, because when trouble arrived, Osric tended to appear with the quiet certainty of weights. Rowan stepped into the cluster and raised done hand. "Enough," he called, voice steady. "Stop pushing, stop shouting. Everyone pause." They did, mostly because the fog had already made them tired and a pause sounded like mercy. Rowan listened to the water. He watched the boat rock slightly. He watched the line angles. "The current is pulling you sideways," he told the crewman. "You are fighting it by shouting." The crewman opened his mouth to protest, then thought better of it. Fog made people cautious. Fog also made people quiet, which helped. Rowan took the bell line and asked Bram for another cord. Bram handed it over with the expression of a man lending out his own patience. Rowan secured a new line to a farther post, changing the angle so the boat would swing gently into place instead of grinding against the piling. 2 dock workers pulled in rhythm. The hull shifted, slow and cooperative, as if it had been waiting for someone to stop arguing and start thinking. In moments the boat sat properly, lines taut, wood no longer complaining. The crewman exhaled. "Thank you," he said, voice smaller now. Rowan nodded. "Fog is not a villain," he replied. "It is just rude." Thane stepped forward, gaze already on the cargo. "What are you bringing?" he asked. The crewman lifted his hands. "Salt," he answered, "and fish, and cloth." Thane blinked once. "All the smells," he said. "Excellent." Bram murmured, "This harbour collects scents like Edric collects paper." Edric looked up sharply. "Paper does not collect," he said. "Paper is organised." Willa leaned in toward Rowan and whispered, "It is very organised when it disappears into timber." Rowan kept his face calm. They began unloading. Salt sacks came first, heavy and damp on the outside, dry inside if luck was still employed at Hedeby. Thane directed the salt into a separate corner away from cloth. Salt was useful and also greedy. It pulled moisture from air and then shared it with everything nearby. Salt was a friend who hugged too tightly. Next came fish barrels. Thane pointed them toward the covered exterior area where the regrettable jars had been stored. The jar crate still sat there, under an awning, smelling offended. Bram frowned at it. Eileen Brooke arrived with a bundle of cloth scraps under her arm, because Eileen brought work with her the way the weather brought damp. She stepped into the warehouse, eyes scanning the new cargo and the old troubles. "Salt and cloth," she said. "Someone is bold." The crewman looked confused. "Salt is valuable," he offered. Eileen nodded. "So is clean cloth. That is why you keep them apart, so they do not become the same thing." Thane looked faintly relieved that someone else had said it. As the last fish barrel rolled in, a dock worker called out from near the back. "Thane," he said, "the cloth bundles from this boat are different. The wrap is stained." Thane moved quickly, which for Thane meant he moved with purpose and no wasted step. He reached the bundle and pressed his palm to the wrap. He sniffed. "Smoke," he said. The crewman stepped forward. "A fire on the road before we boarded," he explained. "Not our fire, someone else. The smoke got into everything." Eileen leaned closer, then stopped short, considering. "Smoking cloth is stubborn," she said. "It can be gentle or it can be permanent, depends how it's settled. Depends what it touched. Edric appeared at the edge of the conversation, because the word fire made paperwork feel important. Was the cloth damaged, he asked. Elin looked at him. Damaged is a word people use when they want a discount, she replied. This cloth is smoky. It will either air out or it will become clothing that smells like a heroic story. Rowan glanced toward the fog outside. The air is wet, he noted. That will not help. Elin nodded. Wet air does not lift smoke. Wet air holds it and gossips. Bram stepped forward. I have soap, he offered. Not much. It is not popular at the docks. Rowan looked at him. Because soap reminds men they are wet and dirty, Rowan said. They prefer to believe it is character. Bram shrugged. Soap is expensive. Character is free. Thane cleared his throat, bringing the conversation back to the warehouse where decisions had to be made. We will hang these bundles too, he said, high with space. Keep them away from salt and fish. If the smoke lingers, we will decide later if it is a problem or a selling point. Edric opened his mouth, likely to argue about precise terms, then closed it again. He wrote instead. Writing was how Edric processed emotions. Elin directed Rowan and a pair of workers to set new rope lines. Bram provided rope. He did it without complaint this time, which was suspicious, but the fog had probably dulled even Bram. They hung the smoky cloth bundles near the existing ones, leaving air gaps. Elin moved between them, fingers checking weave, smelling cautiously, making small hums of assessment. This it will air out, she decided, patting one bundle lightly. This it will keep a memory. This it will become a story. Willa stood nearby, watching with interest. People pay for stories, she said. Elin glanced at her. They do, Elin agreed, but they also complain about them. Willa smiled. Complaining is also a story. As the day shifted toward late afternoon, the fog began to thin. The lamps looked less desperate. The inlet revealed itself again in pieces, like the world returning in stages. A new problem arrived the moment visibility improved, because Hedeby liked timing. A small cart rolled into the dock area with a load of salt fish meant for a buyer across town. The driver argued with a dock worker about where the fish had been stored. The dock worker argued back, because arguing was how some people stayed warm. Rowan stepped in, hands raised slightly. What is the trouble? He asked. The driver pointed toward the covered exterior area. My fish was stored next to that crate, he complained. Now my fish smells like whatever mistake that crate is. Bram looked offended, as if his awning had been insulted. The awning is innocent, Bram muttered. Thane walked over, eyes already narrowing at the situation. Fish always smells like fish, Thane said. That is its charm. The driver looked desperate. Not like this. This is fish plus regret. My buyer will think I have been careless. Elin stepped closer and sniffed the air near the fish barrels, face thoughtful. It is faint, she judged. Not ruinous, but it will annoy someone with a sensitive nose. Osric appeared, calm as ever, because payment arguments were a form of weather, and Osric liked to be ready. The buyer will still pay, he said, if the fish is good. If the buyer does not pay, the buyer is not buying fish, the buyer is buying comfort. The driver spread his hands. Comfort is what people want. Osric nodded. Then they should buy wool, he replied. Edric wrote again because Edric recorded everything that sounded like a rule. Rowan looked at Thane. We need to move the jar crate farther away, Rowan suggested. Thane stared at the crate. Yes, he said, before it gains citizenship. Bram sighed. I will build it a small exile, he said, farther downwind. They moved the jar crate to a more isolated covered spot, away from fish and anything else that deserved peace. The driver watched, then relaxed slightly, as if the world had become reasonable again. It had not, but a person could enjoy the illusion. As evening approached, Elin checked the cloth one last time. The original damp bundles were improving. The smoky bundles still held a faint scent, but it was softer, not pleasant but less aggressive. The warehouse air felt warmer, drier, more controlled, which was Thane's idea of a festival. Edric finished the day toll notes and stacked pages carefully in a leather wrap. He glared at the timber stack as if it might steal paper again. Rowan stood near the warehouse door, watching the harbour settle. Boats rocked, ropes creaked. Men and women moved with smaller steps as the day ended. The fog lifted enough to show distant lights, small and steady across the inlet. Willa walked up beside Rowan, not running now, just walking, which made her look almost unreal. "The harbour looks peaceful," she said. Rowan glanced at her. "That means it is planning something." Willa smiled. "It always is." Elin stepped out of the warehouse, pulling her cloak tight. "The cloth will survive," she said. "The smoke will fade. The salt will be stored properly. The jar crate will be exiled. Hedeby will continue." Rowan nodded. "So the world ends another day," he replied. Elin gave him a look. "Do not be dramatic," she said. "That is Edric's job." Edric looked up from his board, offended on principle. "I am not dramatic," he insisted. "I am precise." Bram snorted softly. "Precision is drama with better handwriting." "The night will come. The lamps will light. The coins will weigh what they weigh. The harbour will pretend it is calm." Rowan looked out at the darkening water. "And we will keep it honest," he replied. Chapter 5: The Warehouse That Sighed. The warehouse had a sound when the weather turned. It was not loud, it was not even a clear sound, more like a long, slow settling in the beams and boards, like the building was taking a deep breath and deciding to endure. Thane Mercer heard that sound the way some people heard music. He did not enjoy it, he simply understood it. The warehouse was older than most of the arguments that happened inside it. It had held spices, wool, timber, salt, iron, and the occasional unfortunate barrel that developed a personality. It knew what damp could do, it knew what careless hands could do. It knew what optimism could do, which was usually worse. Rowan Ashby arrived to find Thane standing at the doorway, hood up, arms crossed, eyes scanning the stacks like he was counting threats. "You are early," Thane observed. Rowan glanced at the sky, grey and low. "The weather woke me," Rowan replied. It was very thoughtful. Thane stepped aside to let him in. The air inside felt warmer, but not dry. Dry was a rumour in Hedeby. Dry was a story told by people who did not live near water. Bram Holt was already there, crouched near a pile of rope lines and spare planks. He had his tools out, which meant something had gone wrong. Bram only opened his toolkit like that when the harbour had offended him personally. Elin Brooke stood near the hanging cloth bundles, fingers testing fibres. Her face was calm, but her eyes were sharp, tracking the way the air moved and the way the cloth accepted it. Osric Penn stood near a small table inside the warehouse, scales set up under a lamp. Edric Vale hovered nearby, board held close, trying to keep ink safe from everything. Edric looked like a man attending a funeral for a neat page. Rowan took in the scene. "What did the harbour do now?" he asked. Thane tilted his head toward a crate sitting alone on a plank, not touching the floor. The crate had careful markings, the kind meant to suggest value and fragility. It also had a fresh crack along one side, not large but meaningful. The crack looked like a confession. "Glass," Thane said. Bram made a sound low in his throat. "Glass packed like it was stone," Bram added. Elin walked closer and sniffed the air near the crate. "It smells like panic," she said. "Or maybe that is Edric." Edric looked up, offended and damp. "I do not smell like panic," he insisted. "I smell like responsibility." Elin nodded politely. "That is what panic says when it is trying to sound employed." Rowan stepped closer to the crate. He ran a hand along the crack and felt the rough edge. "Is it broken?" he asked. Thane answered with the same tone he used for weather forecasts. "Not yet, but it is making plans." Bram stood and wiped his hands on his tunic, which did nothing useful. "It arrived this morning," Bram explained. "From the west. It was stacked under timber." "Under timber? As if glass enjoys pressure." Rowan looked toward the door. "Who signed for it?" Edric cleared his throat. "I recorded it," Edric said. "I did not lift it, if that matters." Thane looked at Rowan. "The crew said it has survived worse," Thane added, "which is the most dangerous sentence a person can say in a warehouse." Rowan nodded. "People said that right before a disaster became real." Osric tapped finger lightly against his scale case. "There is also a payment dispute," Osric said. Rowan shifted his weight. Of course there is, Osric continued, calm. The ship claims the crate is fine and should be paid in full. The buyer claims the crack means the crate is suspect and should be paid less. The scales do not weigh cracks, Bram muttered. They weigh human nonsense, though. Osric ignored that, which was kind. Rowan looked at the crate. What is inside? He asked. Thane made a small grim smile. Glass cups, fine ones, thin. Meant for a hall where people drink and pretend they are not spilling. Elin tilted her head. Thin glass in this weather, bold. Thane nodded. Bold is another word for foolish, sometimes. Rowan crouched and listened. The crate made a faint sound as he shifted it slightly, a soft clink deep inside. It was a delicate sound, like a warning spoken politely. Rowan looked up at Bram. Can you reinforce it? He asked. Bram already had that look, the one that said yes, but I will complain the whole time because complaining is how I stay warm. We can pad it, Bram said. Straw, cloth scraps, planks. We can bind the outside with rope. We can make it less eager to fail. Thane frowned. Use clean straw, he warned. Not the kind that smells like fish or regret. Bram nodded. I have standards. Elin looked at Bram. You sell tar, Elin said. Your standards are flexible. Bram gave her a tired look. Tar is honest, he replied. It does not pretend to be pleasant. Rowan stood. Do it, he said. Make it safe enough to move deeper in, then we decide payment. Osric folded his hands. Payment can be decided now, he said. Safety can happen while people argue. That is the correct order. Edric looked relieved at the concept of correct order. He adjusted his board and stood a little straighter. The buyer is arriving soon, Edric noted. He sent a messenger. He sounded irritated. He used the word unacceptable. Rowan sighed. Unacceptable is a popular word in Hedeby. Thane guided Rowan deeper into the warehouse where the new grain sacks were being stored. Thane pressed a hand to one sack and felt for warmth. Grain is fine, Thane said. It is not wet. It is not trying to grow. Rowan glanced at him. That sounds like praise. Thane nodded once. It is, quietly. They returned to the crate area. Bram had already started. He slid thin planks along the crate sides to brace the cracked board. He wrapped rope around the crate in careful bands, tightening each whir with the practiced precision of a man who had spent his life fixing other people's poor choices. Elin brought cloth scraps, pieces too small to sell but useful for padding. She tucked them through gaps where straw could not reach. Rowan held the crate steady as Bram tightened the rope. The crate creaked softly, as if it wanted to argue, then accepted the pressure. Bram stepped back. There, he said. It is now supported by rope and stubbornness. Two strong materials. Willa Crow slipped into the warehouse, rein on her hood, eyes bright. The buyer is here, she announced. He is at the door. He says his name is Cedric Hearth. He says he has been waiting all his life for glass like this, and now he has a crack instead. Thane frowned. That sounds like a man who will speak a lot. Willa nodded. Yes, he is warming up. Cedric Hearth entered, cloak damp, expression sharp. He was not a large man, but his presence filled space through sheer conviction. He walked straight to the crate and stared at it like it had disappointed him personally. This is the crate, he said. Osric stepped forward with calm authority. This is the crate, he confirmed. Cedric pointed at the crack. That is the crack. Osric nodded. That is the crack. Cedric looked at Osric, searching for sympathy. I will not pay full for cracked goods, Osric replied without changing tone. You will not pay full for broken goods. This is not broken. This is threatened. Cedric stared, threatened. Thane cleared his throat. The crate is reinforced, Thane said. The contents may still be intact. We will open it carefully, with clean hands. Away from damp. Cedric looked at Thane. If it is broken, I will not pay. Osric nodded. If it is broken, you will not pay full. If it is intact, you will pay full. If it is intact but smelled of damp or fish, you will still pay full, because glass does not smell. Elin murmured, yet. Cedric looked around as if he expected someone to save him from this calm logic. "This is unfair," he protested. Osric met his eyes. "The scales do not care about fair," Osric said. "The scales care about weight. I care about agreements." Edric stepped closer, quill poised. "I have recorded the cargo condition and the reinforcement," Edric said. "I can record the opening and the state of the goods. I can record the payment agreement as determined." Cedric glared at Edric. "Do not record my irritation." Edric blinked slowly. "I cannot help it," he replied. "It is happening in front of me." Rowan kept his face neutral. This was the best kind of conflict at Hedeby. No one was unalived. Only pride was bruised. They moved the crate to a clean plank area near a lamp. Bram loosened the rope bands carefully, keeping the bracing planks in place. Thane lifted the lid slowly, listening for the sound of shattered glass. The warehouse held its breath. Inside, straw and cloth padding surrounded rows of thin glass cups wrapped individually. The cups glimmered faintly in the lamplight, pale and delicate. Thane lifted one wrapped cup and unwrapped it with hands that were surprisingly gentle for a man who spent his days moving sacks. The cup emerged intact, no cracks, no chips. It caught the light and looked unreal in the damp air. Cedric leaned forward, eyes wide. "It is fine," he breathed. Thane unwrapped another. "Fine. Another. Fine." Bram looked smug, which was a rare moment of joy. "My rope saved your dreams," Bram said softly. Cedric looked at him like he did not know how to react to that sentence. Osric folded his hands. "The goods are intact," Osric said. "Payment is full." Cedric hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. "Full," he agreed. "But I will say I was inconvenienced." Edric wrote fast. "You may say it," Edric replied. "I will record the part that matters." Cedric looked like he wanted to argue, then realized the only thing worse than losing an argument was losing it while someone wrote it down. "Fine," he said. "Full payment. But next time pack it better." Bram stepped forward. "I will tell the ship crew you said that," Bram replied. "They will be moved deeply, in a place they do not show on their face." Cedric paid. Osric weighed the silver with calm precision. The beam balanced, the weights clicked. The world returned to its steady state. Rowan watched Osric tuck the coins away. He watched Edric stack pages, expression calmer now that a new tragedy had not formed. He watched Thane direct the crate to a safer shelf. Ellen brushed straw from her sleeve. "So," Ellen said quietly to Rowan, "another day saved by rope, patience, and people learning nothing." Rowan nodded. "It is the Hedeby way." Bram retied the rope bands around the crate, not as tight now, more like a respectful embrace. "If anyone asks," Bram muttered, "the harbour did this on purpose." Thane glanced at him. "The harbour never does anything on purpose," Thane replied. "It simply survives its own decisions." Outside, the rain eased again. The lamps still hissed. The warehouse settled into a quieter breath. The building sighed, not with relief, but with the tired acceptance of a place that had seen fragile things survive another day. Chapter 6. Fog over the Inlet. Fog returned to Hedeby like an unwanted relative who insisted they were only visiting briefly. It crept in from the water and filled every space it could find. It softened the harbour lights into pale halo. It hid the far shore. It turned every sound into something closer than it should be. Rowan Ashby arrived to find the docks wrapped in grey again. He could see only a few boats at a time, their hulls dark shapes, their lines faint shadows. The lamp flames looked smaller behind the fog, as if they too were having doubts. Edric Vale stood under the toll lamp, shoulders tight, staring out into the blankness. "I cannot see the boats," he muttered. Rowan stepped beside him. "The boats are still they," Rowan said. "They do not vanish when paperwork is nervous." Edric frowned. "They vanish from my ability to record them correctly." Osric Penn appeared with his scale kit, moving with steady steps on slick boards. He set the kit down and looked into the fog like he was looking at a simple problem. "Fog is just water that cannot commit," Osric observed. Edric glanced at him. "That is not helpful." Osric opened the kit. "It is true," he replied. "True is often not helpful." A horn sounded faintly out on the inlet, long and low. It came from somewhere inside the fog. Then another sound, a scrape of wood, too close. Rowan straightened. "Boat coming in," he said. Thane Mercer stepped out of the warehouse already alert. He did not need to see the boat to know trouble was approaching. The harbour always announced trouble with the same signs. A sound that did not belong, a line that was too loose, a worker moving faster than usual. Willa Crow ran up out of the fog, breath quick. "It is the river boat from the south side," she said. "They cannot see the markers. They are drifting. They are pretending they are not." Rowan nodded. "Of course they are." He moved toward the far post where the outer lines were tied. Bram Holt emerged from the fog as well, as if summoned by the thought of rope. "I heard scraping," Bram said. "That is not a good sound." Rowan held out a hand. "Give me a coil." Bram placed a rope coil into his hand with the solemnity of a man handing over a tool and a prayer. "If you lose this," Bram added, "I will know." Rowan did not ask how Bram would know. Bram always knew. The scraping sound came again, louder. A dark hull shape appeared through the fog, too close to a pylon. The boat moved slowly, but the current did not care about slow. The current cared about direction, and the boat had picked the wrong one. Rowan called out, voice steady. "Hold your pole, stop pushing, listen." A voice answered from the boat, tense and defensive. "We are listening." "Good," Rowan replied. "Then do what I say and we will all pretend this was planned." He threw a line out toward the boat. The crew caught it. Rowan guided them to secure it to their side, then pulled and adjusted the angle so the boat would swing away from the piling instead of grinding into it. The boat shifted, slow and obedient. The scraping stopped. The sound of relief in the air was almost audible. Thane stepped close enough to see the boat now. He squinted at the cargo. "What are you carrying?" he called. "Wood and wool," the crewman answered. Thane exhaled through his nose. "Wool," he repeated, as if the word itself made him tired. "Wool in fog." Wonderful. Ellen Brooke appeared at the warehouse door, cloak damp, eyes already assessing. "If it is wool, keep it high," she called. "Keep it breathing. Keep it away from anything that smells like a story." Bram muttered. "Too late. Everything in this town smells like a story." The crew guided the boat into a proper berth. Rowan tightened the lines and tested the knots with calm hands. The boat settled into place, rocking gently, as if it had not tried to scrape itself into a piling like a stubborn animal. Willa ran off into the fog again, carrying the news that the harbour had survived another minor drama. Hedeby ran on these reports. Without them, people might have to talk about their feelings. Unloading began. The wool bales were wrapped, but the fog clung to everything. The wraps felt damp. Thane hovered, directing workers as if he could command moisture by tone alone. "Higher," he kept saying. "Air gaps. Do not stack too tight. Do not breathe on it." Edric arrived near the warehouse door, stopping just outside. "I will record," he announced, then paused and added, "from here." Ellen glanced at him. "Brave," she said. Edric frowned. "This is sensible." Ellen nodded. "Sensible is brave in Hedeby." Osric set up his scales near the toll post because payment did not wait for fog. A trader approached with silver and a look that suggested he believed the fog would soften rules. Osric weighed the coins anyway. The beam balanced. The weights clicked. The fog did not change the truth. It only changed how much you could see of it. A delay formed, as delays always did. One wool bale was missing its proper mark. The buyer name was smeared. The crew insisted it belonged to a man in town. The dock workers insisted they would not move it without a proper record. The bale sat there, damp and offended, as if it had been promised certainty. Edric stepped forward, annoyed by the smeared mark like it was a personal insult. "This is unreadable," he said. Rowan looked at the bale. "Can you guess it?" Rowan asked. Edric stared. "Guessing is not a method." Willa returned, breath quick, and stopped near them. "I know whose wool it is," she said. Thane turned slowly. "Of course you do." Willa nodded. "It belongs to Alden Rook. He bought 3 bales last week and complained about all of them. He will complain about this one too. He always does." Edric blinked. "How do you know?" he asked. Willa shrugged. "He complains loudly. The fog cannot hide loud." Rowan looked at Edric. Record it as Olden Rook, Rowan suggested. If you are wrong, he will complain. If you are right, he will complain. The outcome is stable. Edric hesitated, then reluctantly wrote the name, cheeks tight with the pain of accepting an imperfect solution. Thane directed the bale to a high shelf with airspace. Aelin adjusted the rope lines to keep the wool from touching damp wood. As the day moved on, the fog thickened again. The harbour lamps became brighter circles in a grey world. Voices sounded closer than they were. Footsteps echoed strangely. Rowan walked the dock and felt the way fog changed everything. It did not stop work. It made work slower. It made people more careful or more reckless depending on their nature. Bram appeared beside him again, carrying a small tin of lamp oil. "I hate fog," Bram said. Rowan glanced at him. "Because you cannot see your inventory being stolen." Bram nodded. "Exactly. Theft should be visible. It is respectful." Rowan almost smiled. Ellen came down the dock line, checking on the wool and the cloth. She moved with the calm authority of someone who knew fibres and their moods. Rowan walked beside her for a moment. "How is the wool?" he asked. Ellen made a thoughtful sound. "It is damp," she said. "It is not ruined, but it will need time and air." Rowan looked at the fog. "Time and air are both expensive today." Ellen nodded. "Yes. That is why patience exists. Patience is the tool no one wants to pay for." Rowan glanced at her. "Do you always talk like that?" he asked. Eileen gave him a small look. "Only when people need it," she replied, "and people always need it." A sudden shout rose from the far end of the dock, not panic, but alarm. Rowan turned and moved fast. Thane moved too. Bram followed, because Bram followed trouble like a man drawn to his own complaints. In the fog, a small boat had drifted loose from its mooring. A line had slipped, likely wet knot, likely hurried hands. The boat was moving slowly away, pulled by current, quiet as a thief. Rowan grabbed a spare line and ran along the dock edge. He threw the line toward the boat. It fell short. Fog made distance deceptive. The boat drifted another length. Willa appeared from nowhere and grabbed the end of the line. "Again," she said, already moving. Rowan threw again. This time the line caught the boat rail. Willa hauled with quick strength, pulling the boat back toward the dock while Rowan and a dock worker pulled in rhythm. The boat bumped gently into place, as if embarrassed to have tried to leave. Thane tightened the mooring line and checked the knot. "This knot was tied with hope," Thane said. Bram nodded. "Hope is cheap," he replied. "That is why it is everywhere." Edric arrived late, panting slightly, which meant he had run enough to feel insulted. "Do I need to record this?" he asked. Osric had come as well, calm as always. "Record that the boat tried to escape," Osric suggested. "It will not help, but it will be amusing." Edric frowned, then wrote anyway because Edric could not resist a record. As evening came, the fog finally began to thin. The far shore showed again, faint but real. The lamps looked less lonely. The harbour sounds returned to normal distances. Thane closed the warehouse door and checked the latch twice, because Thane trusted nothing once. Elin tied off the last rope line and stepped back, satisfied. Bram packed his lamp oil and muttered about the expense of keeping light alive. Osric wrapped his scales and weights with care, as if protecting them from the very idea of damp. Edric stacked his pages in a leather wrap and held it close like a small child. Rowan stood at the dock edge and watched the inlet reappear. The water moved in slow, dark folds. The boats rocked gently, lines taut, knots holding. The town behind the harbour glowed in small, warm points. Willa walked up beside him, not running now, just walking, as if the fog had finally allowed her to be human. "Fog day survived," she said. Rowan nodded. "Fog day survived," he agreed. "Which means tomorrow will bring a new personality." Ellen glanced at him. "Do not borrow trouble," she warned. Rowan looked out at the water. "I do not borrow it," he replied. "The harbour lends it freely." The lamps trembled. The air felt colder. The last of the fog drifted away, offended to have been resisted. Hedeby settled into night again, pretending to be calm, pretending to sleep, pretending it was not held together by rope, Ink and Patience. Chapter 7. Wax, Ink and Waiting. Hedeby had a special talent for making simple things complicated. It could take a rope and turn it into an argument. It could take a sack of grain and turn it into a rumour. And it could take a small piece of wax and turn it into a crisis worthy of a very tired sigh. The morning air was cold enough to feel sharp. The rain had paused again, not because it was finished, but because it enjoyed building suspense. The harbour smelled cleaner for a moment, like damp wood had been rinsed and left to dry, even though it never truly dried. Rowan Ashby walked the dock line with his hands in his sleeves, shoulders hunched against the wind. Boats rocked gently, their lines holding steady. The inlet looked calmer today, which meant it was planning something else for later. Hedeby did not waste calm. It used it to recharge. At the toll post, Edric Vale stood under the lamp with a board in his hands and the kind of expression usually reserved for a broken promise. His ink pot sat near his elbow. His quill hovered like it could sense danger. Osric Penn sat beside him with his scale kit closed, not weighing at this moment, just waiting. Osric could wait longer than most people could breathe. It was one of his quiet talents. Bram Holt approached with a bundle of wax sticks tucked in one arm and a small pouch of sealing cords in the other. He looked annoyed before anyone spoke, which saved time. Rowan slowed as he reached them. "You look like you have found a new reason to dislike paper," Rowan said to Edric. Edric did not look up. "I have found a reason to dislike people," he replied. Osric tilted his head slightly. "That is a larger category," he observed. Edric held up a hand, 2 fingers pinched together as if he was holding something tiny and offensive. "The seal is missing," Edric said. Rowan blinked. "What seal?" "The toll seal," Edric answered, voice tight. "The small wax seal stamp that marks the ledger packet. The one that tells everyone this is official and not a collection of damp thoughts." Bram let out a soft sound. "That seal stamp," Bram said, "is not yours to lose." Edric finally looked up, eyes sharp. "I did not lose it," he insisted. "I placed it. I always place it. It was in the box. The box was here. Then I turned to right. Then I turned back. Then it was gone." Osric opened his scale kit slightly, as if the mere presence of tools might comfort the air. "Missing tools usually have 2 places," he said. "The first place is under something. The second place is in someone's pocket." Edric stiffened. Nowold would steal a seal stamp. Bram nodded slowly. Nowold would admit to stealing a seal stamp, he corrected. Rowan rubbed his forehead. "How urgent is there?" Rowan asked. Edric lifted the leather wrap that held pages from the last few days. "Without the seal," Edric said, "this packet cannot be sent to the town hall record keeper. Without the packet, the toll notes are not verified. Without verification, people will claim they paid less, or nothing, or that the fog ate their coins." Osric nodded. "People will claim many things," he said. "Verification helps shorten their stories." Thane Mercer emerged from the warehouse, drawn by the word missing, as if it had a scent. His hood was down, hair damp. He looked like he had been arguing with moisture, and had not won, but had also not lost. "What is missing?" Thane asked. Edric held up his board like evidence. "My seal stamp." Thane stared at him. "The stamp," Thane repeated. "The one you treat like a holy object." "It is not holy," Edric replied. "It is necessary." Thane looked toward Rowan. "If he does not seal his papers," Thane said, "he will pace the dock all day. It is hard to store cargo when a man is pacing like a trapped goose." Edric glared. "I do not pace like a goose." Willa Crow appeared from the side path, breath quick, eyes bright. "He paces like a wounded clerk," Willa said helpfully. "It is worse." Edric looked like he might tell her to leave, then remembered Willa was also useful when things disappeared. "Willa," Rowan said, "have you seen it?" Willa tilted her head. "The stamp?" she asked. "The little metal thing that makes Edric feel powerful." Edric made a small sound of protest. Willa smiled at him. "I have not seen it," she admitted, "but I can smell a problem." "The stamp will be close." Missing things in Hedeby are almost always close. They hide like children, not like criminals. Osric closed his kit and stood. "We search," he said. "Quietly, without panic. Panic makes hands clumsy. Edric inhaled like he wanted to argue, then exhaled and nodded. Edric did not enjoy not being in control, but he disliked chaos more. They began with the obvious: the tollpost table, the bench, the lamp base, the cracks in the wood where a small thing could slide. Rowan knelt and ran his fingers along the edge of the boards. Osric checked beneath the cloth. Bram lifted a small box of cords and wax sticks and looked inside as if the stamp might have decided to live there. Nothing. Edric stared at the table as if it had betrayed him. "It was here," he said. Osric moved calmly, eyes scanning the ground around the post. "Then it is here still," Osric replied. "The ground does not steal. It only hides." Thane walked a slow circle, boots quiet on wet boards. "It could have fallen into the gap by the post," he suggested. Rowan checked. He slid a finger down the gap and felt only damp wood. "Not that," Rowan said. Willa wandered a few steps away, head tilted, as if listening to the harbour whisper. "Where did you last use it?" she asked Edric. Edric frowned, thinking. "Yesterday evening," he said. "I sealed the packet for the grain toll notes. Then I put it in the box. Then I wrote the new page. Then I turned back." Willa nodded. "And you did not leave this spot?" Edric looked offended. "I do not wander," he replied. "Wandering makes ink spill," Bram muttered. "He wanders in his mind. It is dangerous there too." Rowan looked toward the warehouse. "Edric," Rowan said, "did you carry any pages into the warehouse yesterday?" Edric hesitated. "Only briefly," he admitted. "The wind was too strong. I moved inside to finish writing by the lamp." Thane narrowed his eyes. "So your holy stamp went into my warehouse?" Thane said. Edric lifted his chin. "It went into your warehouse with my careful hands." Thane pointed toward the door. "Then we search my warehouse with your careful hands," Thane replied. "And we do it before I start charging rent for lost metal." They went inside. The warehouse air was warmer and smelled of straw and wood. Cloth bundles hung on rope lines like sleeping bats. Wool bales sat high with air gaps. Thane had arranged everything to keep damp from winning, which was an endless project that looked like a calm battle. Edric moved carefully between stacks, eyes scanning every surface. Osric followed, checking corners, looking under benches, moving small items with patient fingers. Rowan checked the lamp table where Edric sometimes wrote. There were ink stains, a few hardened drips, and one small smear that looked like it had been wiped in a hurry. Rowan did not comment. Edric would hear the accusation in silence. Bram lifted a bundle of sealing cords and shook it gently. "If the stamp is in there," Bram said, "it is trying to become part of the rope fan." Eileen Brooke arrived, cloak damp, hands carrying a small bundle of cloth scraps. She took in the searching bodies and sighed softly. "What is missing now?" she asked. Edric held up his empty palm. "My seal stamp." Eileen blinked slowly. "That little thing has this many men searching." Edric looked insulted. "It is not little," he said. "It is official." Eileen nodded. "Official things are often little," she replied. "That is how they get lost." Thane pointed toward a shelf. "If you find it stuck in my straw," he warned Edric, "you will write an apology note to the warehouse." Edric muttered something quiet that sounded like agreement forced through pride. Willa wandered near a stack of timber and crouched, peering at the floor. "What are you doing?" Rowan asked. "Listening," Willa said. "Small metal makes a different sound when it falls. It lands sharp. It makes the world flinch." "I am listening for the flinch." Bram looked impressed. "That is nonsense," Bram said. "But it is confident nonsense." Willa smiled. "Confidence is a tool." Osric stopped near a low bench and held up a small strip of wax. "Here," he said. Edric leaned in. "That is wax," Edric said. "I have wax. I do not need more wax." Osric pointed at it. "This wax has an imprint," he said. "A partial imprint." The stamp touched it. Edric stared at the wax strip as if it had begun speaking. Osric turned his head slightly and looked beneath the bench. His hand slid under and touched something. He drew it out. The seal stamp. It was dusted with straw bits and had a faint smear of ink on one edge, as if it had been briefly involved in a struggle with handwriting. Edric made a sound that was not quite relief and not quite triumph, something between. "There it is," he said. Willa stood and crossed her arms. "Under the bench," she said. "Missing things are always close. They just want attention." Thane exhaled slowly. "That bench will be blamed for this for a week," Thane said. Bram nodded. "The bench should be grateful. Being blamed means it matters." Edric took the stamp with two hands as if it might disappear again out of spite. "I will clean it," he said quickly. Elin looked at him. "Do not polish it too much," she warned. "If it becomes shiny, people will try harder to steal it." Edric frowned. "No one is stealing it." Osric tilted his head. "People steal what they think is valuable," he said. "Sometimes they are right. Sometimes they just like the idea of value." Edric tucked the stamp into his small box and closed it carefully, then held the box like it was an egg. "I will seal the packet now," he announced. Rowan stepped aside and watched Edric work. Edric melted wax with careful heat, dripped it onto the cord knot, then pressed the stamp into it. He lifted the stamp slowly. The imprint was clean and clear. Edric exhaled as if a storm had passed. "There," he said. "Official again." Thane pointed toward the cloth lines. "Now that you are official," Thane said, "you can be official somewhere else. I have cargo to store." Edric looked wounded. "I was helping." Thane nodded. "Yes, helping yourself. It is a common hobby outside the warehouse." The day continued. A small boat crew approached Bram demanding credit for lamp oil and rope, offering friendly smiles and the promise of payment later. Bram listened with a blank face that suggested his sympathy had been left at home. "Credit is a kind word," Bram said. "It means I give you goods and you give me hope. I do not stock hope." The crewman laughed. "Come on, Bram, we are good for it." Bram stared at him. "You are good for wind and wet wood," he replied. "Those are abundant already." Osric stepped in, calm as ever. "If you want credit," he said, "you offer collateral." The crewman blinked. "Collateral?" Osric nodded. "Something you value," he explained gently. "Then Bram has less reason to regret knowing you." The crew offered a small tool, then a knife, then a decorative pin. Bram considered each like a man judging the quality of a bad idea. "No," Bram said finally. "I will take coin now, or I will take coin later with extra coin attached. That extra coin is called your inconvenience fee." Edric looked up from his sealed packet. "That is not a legal term," he said automatically. Bram looked at him. "It is my term," Bram replied. "It is legal in my shed." Rowan watched the crew surrender and pay in proper coin. Osric weighed it, the beam balanced. The world returned to its usual shape. By evening the harbour lamps were lit again. The wind softened. The rain still hovered in the air, thinking about returning. Hedeby settled into night work, steady and stubborn. Edric walked toward the town hall record keeper with his sealed packet held close. He looked satisfied in the way only a person with a complete record could look satisfied. It was a quiet joy, small and sharp. Willa fell into step beside Rowan. "So," she said, "the world ended because of a stamp." Rowan shook his head. "The world did not end," he replied. Edric almost did. Willa smiled. "It counts." Rowan looked out at the inlet, dark and calm for now. "Tomorrow," he said, "something else will vanish." Willa nodded. "And we will find it," she replied, "because Hedeby is not clever. It is just busy." Chapter 8. The Night Market Whisper. Night market in Hedeby was not a single place. It was a mood that spread through the harbour and the streets behind it. It was lantern light under eaves. It was low voices and quiet bargaining. It was the sound of coin on wood, the smell of smoke and fish and wool, and the soft shuffle of people pretending they were only browsing while their eyes measured everything. The day had been damp and fussy, but the evening turned calm enough for trade to grow bold again. A thin mist hovered over the inlet, not fog, just the air remembering the sea. The lamps trembled gently in the breeze, their flames small and determined. Rowan Ashby stood on the dock near a stack of crates. watching a crew unload a modest cargo. It was not dramatic cargo, it was the kind of cargo that kept towns alive. Clay jars of oil, bundles of cord, a small box of metal fittings for ship repairs, simple things with simple uses. Bram Holt hovered nearby, eyes sharp, spotting his own supplies in the wild the way a shepherd spots stray sheep. "Those fittings," Bram murmured, "are mine." Rowan glanced at him. "How can you tell?" Bram pointed. "That scratch on the corner. I scratched it myself when I dropped it. It is my signature." Rowan nodded. "A tragic signature." Bram sighed. "It is a signature of experience." Across the dock, a small cluster of traders had gathered under a lamp. Osric Penn was there with his scales, because trade without weighing was just a story. Edric Vale sat nearby with his board because a story became dangerous when it was not written down. Elin Brooke moved through the market edge carrying a folded length of cloth. She had come to meet a visiting spinner from upstream, who had promised a new technique for tightening thread in damp air. Elin valued techniques the way Bram valued rope. Techniques did not disappear as easily, although they did get stolen if you boasted about them. Willa Crow darted between groups carrying messages, collecting whispers, delivering news with that bright half-smile that suggested she enjoyed the world a little too much for her own safety. Rowan watched a crate pass too close to the edge of the dock. He put a hand out and guided it inward with a gentle push. "Careful," he told the worker. "The water is hungry." The worker nodded, embarrassed. He adjusted his grip and carried the crate to the warehouse door, where Thane Mercer waited like a gate that had learned to speak. Thane inspected the crate label, then tapped it once. "Store it high," he ordered. "Air gap, away from wool." The worker nodded again and obeyed. It was easier to obey Thane than to argue. Arguing with Thane felt like arguing with a shelf. The shelf would win by still being there. Rowan stepped toward the toll lamp where Osric worked. A trader was offering a pouch of mixed coins, smiling too warmly. Osric poured the coins into known pan and set weights with slow, calm movements. The beam tilted. Osric adjusted. The beam steadied. Osric lifted a coin and examined its edge. "Light," he said. The trader leaned in, only slightly. Osric looked up. "Slightly is still light," he replied. The trader tried a laugh. "It has travelled." Osric nodded. "Then it should rest," he said. "Away from my table," Edric wrote, because Edric could not resist recording the world's most common argument. Rowan stepped away and let Osric handle it. Osric always did. People arrived thinking they could charm the scales. They left learning the scales did not have a heart to soften. Near the clothline area, Ilin met the visiting spinner, a woman named Marin Ashford with a calm voice and a basket of thread samples. Marin spoke with careful words, the way skilled people did when they did not want their secrets to leak. Ilin unfolded the cloth length she had brought. "This is from the Smoky shipment," Ilin said softly. "It is improving, but it still tells stories." Marin ran her fingers over it. "Smoke in cloth is like pride in a man," Marin observed. "It fades, but it never fully leaves." Ilin smiled. "That is unfair to cloth," she replied. Marin showed Ilin a twist method for tightening thread with less friction, using a simple bone tool and a careful rhythm. Ilin watched closely, then tried it herself, her hands moving with quick intelligence. "That will help in damp," Ilin said. Marin nodded. "Damp is not a condition," she replied. "Damp is a lifestyle." Ilin glanced toward the harbour. Hedeby agrees. Willa appeared beside them, eyes bright. "Ilin," Willa said, "Thane is looking for you." Ilin kept her hands working. "Thane always looks for me," she replied. "He thinks cloth is a child and iron its mother." Willa nodded seriously. "He says a new buyer wants to inspect wool bales tonight. He says the buyer is the sort of person who complains in advance." Ilin sighed. "I will come," she said. "I will bring patience and a sharp tongue. That is what wool buyers deserve." They walked toward the warehouse. The night market continued around them. People bargained over fish, over salt, over iron nails. Someone sold warm bread from a basket and pretended it was not overpriced. People paid anyway because the smell of warm bread could make even Bram believe in happiness for a moment. Inside the warehouse, Thane stood near the wool bales with a buyer named Alden Rook, a man whose face looked like it had been carved out of dissatisfaction. Alden ran his hands over a wool wrap, then frowned. "It feels damp," he said. Thane held his expression steady. "It is wool in Hedeby," Thane replied. "It exists near water. Damp is expected." Alden frowned harder. "I do not pay for damp." Ellen stepped forward. "You do not pay for damp," Ellen agreed. "You pay for wool. Wool can be aired, wool can be combed, wool can be turned into something warm that will keep you from complaining so loudly." Alden looked at her. "Who are you?" Ellen met his eyes. "Someone who has listened to wool buyers too long," she replied. Thane did not smile, but his eyes softened slightly, which in Thane language was laughter. Alden pointed at the wrap. "This bale should be cheaper." Thane shook his head once. "'Tis stored properly," Thane said. "High, air gaps, no fish, no salt, no jar regret. You want cheaper, buy worse wool." Alden opened his mouth, then closed it. His eyes shifted toward Osric at the far end of the warehouse, as if considering a second battle. Osric happened to glance up at that moment, calm gaze meeting Alden. The look was not threatening. It was simply empty of compromise. Alden looked away quickly. "Fine," Alden said. "Full price. But I will complain about it later." Ellen nodded. "That is your tradition," she replied. "We respect tradition here." Alden paid, Osric weighed, the beam balanced, Edric record. The world did not end. Hedeby was pleased. Back outside, the night market deepened. The harbour lamps made warm pools on wet boards. The mist over the inlet shimmered faintly. A boat crew sat on a low crate and ate bread, speaking softly about wind and roots and the way the current tried to pull you sideways when you were tired. Rowan walked the dock line again, checking knots by habit. He stopped near the covered corner where the regrettable jar crate lived in exile. The smell was still there, faint but stubborn. The crate seemed to resent being ignored. Bram approached, holding a small board and a hammer. "I am building it a better exile," Bram announced. Rowan glanced at him. "You are putting effort into banishing a crate." Bram nodded. "It has earned attention. It has too much personality." Rowan watched Bram hammer two boards into place, creating a small barrier that kept the crate farther from foot traffic and farther from air that belonged to decent cargo. Bram worked with the quiet satisfaction of a man making order in a world that refused it. Willa appeared again, as she always did, carrying a message in her eyes before she even spoke. "Rowan," she said. "There is a whisper." Rowan looked at her. "A whisper." Willa nodded. "A ship crew is saying they will leave at dawn. They say they are waiting on way last payment. They are getting impatient. They are the kind of impatient that turns into bad decisions." Rowan felt the familiar tug of responsibility. "Which ship?" Willa named it. An ordinary cargo boat with an ordinary crew, nothing dramatic on its own. That was what made it dangerous. Ordinary problems were the ones that grew quietly. Rowan went to Thane. "We have a crew threatening to leave early," Rowan said. "They say they wait on payment." Thane frowned. "Payment is Osric," he said. Rowan nodded. "But if they leave without clearing, Edric will also become a storm." Thane exhaled slowly. "Then we prevent a storm by finding coin," he replied. "That is the best kind of storm prevention." They found Osric under the toll lamp, scales set up, hands calm. "A crew says they are waiting on payment," Rowan told him. Osric nodded. "They are waiting on a buyer," Osric replied. "The buyer delayed. The buyer sent a message that he will arrive late. The crew does not like waiting." Rowan glanced toward the misty inlet. "Waiting is part of water," Rowan said. "The crew should learn." Osric closed the scale kit. "I can go speak to them," he said. "They will listen to the voice of measured truth or they will not. Either way, the rules remain." Edric joined them, hearing the word rules like a bell. "If they leave without clearance," Edric said, "I will record them as unverified. I will inform the record keeper. I will make the paper trail so long they will trip over it in the next town." Rowan looked at Edric. "That is almost inspiring," Rowan said. Edric looked offended. "It is necessary," he insisted. Osric walked with Rowan toward the ship in question. The crew sat near their boat, faces tired, hands restless. One man stood and lifted his chin. We are leaving at dawn, he said. Payment or no payment. Osric stepped closer, calm. You may leave when you like, Osric said. But if you leave without clearance, the next port will be told you left without clearance. Then you will wait longer there. Waiting follows you. The crewman frowned. They will not care. Osric nodded. Some will care, he replied. The ones who pay, the ones who weigh, the ones who keep lists. You will trade faster if you do this properly. Rowan watched the crewman shift, irritation meeting reason. Reason was not always popular, but it was stubborn. The crewman exhaled. When will the buyer come, he asked. Osric answered calmly. Before midnight, he said. If not, I will send Willa to find him, and she will make him wish he had arrived earlier. Willa, standing nearby, smiled sweetly. I am very persuasive, she said. The crewman looked uncertain. How persuasive? Willa tilted her head. Enough, she replied. That settled it. The crew sat again. Their restless hands became less restless. The harbour returned to its night rhythm. Rowan looked out at the lamps, the mist, the moving figures of people buying bread and thread and small bits of metal. The night market whisper had been answered, not with force, not with drama, but with calm pressure, like a steady hand on a rope. Aelin passed by again, cloak pulled tight. Night markets make people talk, she said to Rowan. Rowan nodded. Talk turns into trouble. Aelin shrugged. Talk also turns into work, she replied. That is how we stay fed. Rowan watched the inlet shimmer faintly and felt the small, quiet satisfaction of a problem contained. Not solved forever, nothing in Hedeby was solved forever, but contained for now, which was the best kind of victory this town allowed. Chapter 9. Storm Delay, Minor Tragedy. The wind arrived first, polite enough to knock before it came in. Pushed at the inlet water, teased the dock lamps, and made the ropes hum with that low note that meant the harbour was about to become more difficult on purpose. Hedeby responded the way it always did. Note with panic, with routine, with people pulling hoods tighter, checking knots twice, and telling each other the weather would pass soon, as if the weather cared about reassurance. Rowan Ashby stood on the dock at the edge of the lamplight and watched the Schlei darken as the wind roughened its surface. Boats tugged at lines, shifting their weight like tired animals. The boards beneath his boots were wet and slick, and the air smelled sharper, colder, more awake than it had been. Thane Mercer stepped out of the warehouse, eyes already narrowed, hands empty but posture full of decisions. Thane looked toward the sky and then toward the stacks inside, as if he could measure the coming trouble and decide where to store it. Storm, Thane muttered. Rowan glanced at him. Is it a real storm, Rowan asked, or a harbour storm? Thane did not smile, but his mouth shifted slightly. It is a real storm that will become a harbour storm the moment people pretend it is only weather, Thane replied. Bram Holt appeared under the eaves of his shed holding a tin of tar and a bundle of spare rope. He looked like a man preparing for a sermon he did not want to deliver. I heard the wind talking, Bram said. It is saying it wants my inventory. Rowan nodded. The wind is a loyal customer. Bram grunted and stepped closer. If any rope disappears tonight, Bram added, I will blame the storm and then I will blame you. Rowan looked out at the boats. You may blame me in advance, Rowan replied. It will save you time. Willa Crow ran up from the town path, cheeks red, breath quick. Willa carried news the way a gull carried noise, efficiently and without shame. The south boat is delayed, she announced. The one with grain. They anchored early. They do not want to risk the inlet in this wind. Thane stiffened. Grain? He repeated. Rowan nodded. They made the sensible choice. Thane looked offended by the concept of sensible choice existing near a harbour. Sensible choice will still become my problem, Thane said. Osric Penn was already at the toll post, scales set up under the lamp, because the weather did not excuse obligations. Edric Vale sat beside him with a writing board, posture tight. Edric had been having a better day, until the word delayed entered the air. Delayed, Edric repeated softly, like the word had a taste. Rowan walked to them. The grain boat anchored early, he said. They will come in after the worst gusts. Edric stared at his inkpot. "Do they know how difficult it is to record a delay cleanly?" he asked. Osric adjusted a weight in his kit. "You record the truth," Osric replied. "The truth is always clean. People are not." Edric made a small sound that suggested he did not enjoy being reminded. The wind strengthened as evening deepened. The lamps burned smaller flames, as if they were conserving themselves. The harbour grew louder, not from shouting, but from wood and rope and water making their opinions known. A mast creaked. A line snapped tight and then settled. A loose plank tapped like a nervous foot. Rowan walked the dock line, checking each mooring. He tightened what needed tightening. He added extra lines where boats would tug hardest. He spoke to dock workers in short, calm phrases, because long phrases got stolen by wind. Inside the warehouse, Thane paced a short distance and then stopped himself, because Thane did not pace. Pacing was for people who did not have enough shelves to rearrange. Instead, he checked the grain corner, the dry straw, the high platforms, and the air gaps. Grain was a quiet risk. Grain did not scream like fish. Grain did not leak like jars. Grain simply turned bad when you were not watching, and then it looked innocent while it ruined your week. Ellen Brooke arrived with her cloak pulled tight and her hair tucked back. She stepped into the warehouse and took what breath, then narrowed her eyes. "Moist air is coming," she said. Thane nodded. "Yes." Elin walked to the grain area and touched the straw. "Not wet yet," she judged. "But the storm will try." Rowan watched her. "How do we stop a storm from trying?" Rowan asked. Elin glanced at him. "You do not stop it," she replied. "You redirect it. Like a child. Or like Edric." Edric, standing near the door to avoid damp, looked offended on principle. "I am not a storm," he insisted. Elin looked at him. "No," she agreed. "You are a drizzle that lasts all day." That made Rowan almost smile. He kept his face calm. Harbour humour worked best when it stayed low. As the night advanced, the wind pushed harder. The inlet water rose in short waves. The anchored boats out in the Schlei flashed occasional lantern light through spray. Somewhere out there the grain boat waited, crew likely staring at the dark water and thinking very hard about how much they wished to be inside a warehouse instead. Near the toll post a small line of traders formed anyway. They had grown used to weather. They had grown used to inconvenience. They had grown used to pretending inconvenience was a test of character. Osric weighed coins with steady hands. Edric wrote. Bram sold lamp oil at a price that suggested he was charging extra for the wind itself. A trader complained. "This is expensive," the trader said, waving a coin. Bram looked at him. "The wind is expensive," Bram replied. "I cannot sell you wind. I can sell you oil so you can see the wind stealing your hat." The trader did not appreciate this truth. He paid anyway. A shout came from the inlet. Rowan turned. A small boat had come loose from its secondary line and was tugging harder than it should, the knot strained by wet and gusts. Rowan ran, grabbed the line and pulled it tight. A dock worker joined, then another. They held while Rowan retied the knot, fingers quick despite numb cold. The rope settled, the boat eased, and the harbour calmed for a moment as if it had been satisfied by the attention. Willa appeared beside Rowan, breath quick. "The grain boat is trying now," she said. "They are moving in. They think the worst gusts have passed." Rowan nodded. "Then we meet them," he replied. He moved to the far post with Bram and 2 dock workers. Bram carried extra rope and looked grimly pleased to have a reason to use it. The boat appeared through dark spray, lantern bobbing. It came in cautious, slower than most, which was wise. The wind still pushed, but the current was manageable. Rowan called out instructions and the crew listened, because storm made everyone humble for a few minutes. The boat reached the dock. Lines flew. Rowan caught one, looped it, tightened. Bram secured another. The hull bumped gently, a tired complaint. The boat settled, tied and safe. Thane stood at the warehouse door, already counting sacks with his eyes. "Unload fast," he ordered. "Keep it moving. Keep it off the wet boards. Into the warehouse. High platforms." The crew began unloading grain sacks, heavy and damp on the outside from spray. The sacks looked fine, which was exactly what worried Thane. Grain looked fine right up until it was not. Elin moved alongside Thane, watching each sack pass. "Feel the warmth," she told a worker. "If it is warm, it may be starting to change." The worker looked confused. "Warm like the body?" he asked. Elin shook her head. "Warm like a secret," she replied. Thane pressed a palm against Shalai's sack and held it there. Eyes narrowed. Then he moved to another sack and did the same. His face stayed calm, but his hands moved faster. "This wine," Thane said, pointing. "Set it aside." The crewman frowned. "It is fine." Thane stared at him. "If you say fine none more time," Thane replied, "I will store you outside to prove a point." The sack was set aside. Elin leaned close and sniffed the seam. "It smells slightly sweet," she said. "Not good sweet. Early sweet." Rowan stepped closer. "Can it be saved?" he asked. Elin shrugged. "Maybe, if it is only beginning, if it is only damp. If it is not pretending." Thane looked at the sack like it had betrayed him. "We open it," he decided. "We check the grain inside. We do not store lies." Edric arrived, board tucked under one arm, eyes wide. "Open a sack," he repeated. "Is that allowed?" Thane looked at him. "It is allowed if you want to eat next season," Thane replied. Edric swallowed and stepped closer, quill ready like it could defend him. Osric approached as well, because once a sack was suspect, payment would become a conversation. Thane cut the seam carefully. Grain spilled into a clean tray. It looked mostly normal, but there were clumps, damp clumps. The smell was faint but real, that early sweet smell Elin had warned about. Thane exhaled slowly. "Minor tragedy," he said. Rowan looked at him. "Minor," Rowan repeated. Thane nodded. "Yes, minor nowed. Major later, if we pretend it is not happening." Elin stirred the grain gently with a wooden scoop. "We separate the damp clumps," she said. "We spread the rest thin. Air it. Warm it gently. If it stays sweet, it is worse. If it loses the smell, we caught it early." The crewman looked defensive. The sacks were dry when we loaded. Thane looked at him with tired patience. "Then the sea disagreed," Thane replied. "The sea always votes." Osric folded his hands. "This sack is not full value," Osric said calmly. The crewman stiffened. "But the rest are fine." Osric nodded. "Then the rest are full value," he replied. "This is not. We will weigh the loss in coin, not in anger." Edric began writing fast, recording the inspection, the smell, the clumps, the decision. He wrote like a man trying to pin down a slippery animal. Bram stepped forward with a jar of tar and a strip of cloth. "If you want to seal the opened seam after you remove the damp," Bram offered, "I can help. Tar keeps moisture out. It also keeps hope out. Very reliable." Thane nodded. "Bring it," he said. They worked for a long stretch of night. The good grain sacks went onto high platforms with air gaps. The suspect grain was spread thin on clean planks near gentle heat, not too close, because heat could also ruin grain if you were careless. Elin supervised the spreading like a calm commander. Thane adjusted straw and vents. Bram sealed seams and muttered about how every problem could be prevented if people stopped trusting weather. Osric calculated the payment adjustment with quiet precision. Edric recorded until his wrist looked tired. Outside, the wind eased slowly. The worst gusts passed. The lamp stood straighter. The inlet water softened from sharp chop to rough ripples. Near the end of the shift, Osric approached the crewman with a small pouch of coins. "This is what you will receive tonight," Osric said. "The missing value for the suspect sack is removed. If the grain recovers, we add value later. If it does not, the value stays removed. This is simple." The crewman frowned, then sighed. "Simple," he repeated. Osric nodded. "Simple is rare," he replied. "Appreciate it." Rowan watched the crew accept the coins and the decision. No shouting, no threats, just tired agreement. In Hedeby, that counted as peace. Thane stood in the warehouse doorway and looked at the spread grain, the stacked sacks, the hanging cloth, the rope lines. "We keep fighting damp," he murmured. Ellen stood beside him. "Yes," she replied. "Damp is stubborn. So are we." Rowan stepped out into the calmer night air and felt the town settle. The storm had tried. The harbour had answered. A minor tragedy had been caught early, held in place by work and routine, and the refusal to pretend. Chapter 10. Lamplight and Ledger. Morning after a storm felt like a gift Hedeby did not fully trust. The air was clearer, the wind calmer, and the harbour smelled briefly clean, as if the whole place had been washed and then allowed a moment of dignity before the next mess arrived. The sky was still grey, because Hedeby did not do bright mornings often, but the grey was softer. The inlet water moved in slow, steady folds again, the kind of movement that made a person believe the world could be predictable if it tried hard enough. Rowan Ashby walked the dock line and listened to the calm. He did not relax. Calm had tricked him before. Still, he let his shoulders drop slightly, just enough to remember he had muscles that did not need to be clenched all day. Boats sat properly at their berths, lines taut, knots holding. The boards were wet, but less slick. The lamps had been extinguished, leaving the pale daylight to do its modest job. Near the warehouse door, Thane Mercer stood with a small group of workers, checking the grain that had been spread thin the night before. Thane had not slept much. He wore the look of a man who had spent hours listening to damp and refusing to let it win. Ellen Brooke crouched near the planks, fingers moving through grain gently, lifting a clump and breaking it apart, smelling, judging, deciding. Her face remained calm, which made everyone else feel less likely to shout. Bram Holt was nearby with a small tin of tar, because Bram was always nearby when the world needed sealing. He leaned against a post and watched the inspection, like a man watching a verdict. Osric Penn stood at the edge of the warehouse threshold, scales still packed, hands folded. Osric did not need the scales out to weigh a situation. He could do it in his head. The scales were only there to make people behave. Edric Vale stood a few steps back, board in hand, pages tidy, face cautious. He had learned that even on a calm morning, paper could find new ways to suffer. Ailyn lifted her head. "The smell is less," she announced. Thane narrowed his eyes. "Less is not none," Thane replied. Ailyn nodded. "No," she agreed, "but less means we caught it early. The grain is not fully turned, it is only embarrassed." Rowan stepped closer. "So it is usable?" Rowan asked. Ailyn ran grain through her fingers again. "Most of it," she said. "The damp clumps should be removed and fed to animals or discarded. The rest can dry further. If we keep air moving and do not stack it too soon, it will be fine." Thane exhaled slowly, a breath he might have called relief if he trusted the word. "Then the loss is smaller," he said. Osric nodded. "Then the payment adjustment can be smaller," he replied. The crewman from the grain boat stood near the doorway, looking tired but hopeful in a cautious way. He watched Ellen and Thane like a man waiting for weather to announce a verdict. Osric turned toward him. "The grain recovers enough that we return part of the withheld value," Osric said. The crewman looked relieved, then tried to hide it. "How much?" he asked. Osric answered calmly. "Enough to be fair," he said, "not enough to reward the sea." Edric wrote that down because it sounded like a rule, Bram muttered quietly to Rowing. "If anyone ever rewards the sea," Bram said, "I will start charging the sky for looking at my shed." Rowan nodded. "The sky will pay in rain." Bram sighed. "It already does." With the grain problem contained, the harbour shifted into its next phase, the calm after work, the stage where people pretended everything was normal again. Boats arrived, carts rolled, traders argued politely. Children ran and were told not to, then ran again. Hedeby resumed its steady pulse. Rowan supervised a clean docking at mid-morning, a small boat from upstream carrying cord and wooden bowls. The approach was smooth, the lines thrown neatly, the knot tied properly. Rowan watched it settle and felt suspicious. "That was too easy," he murmured. Willa Crow appeared, walking this time, not running. The calm morning had granted her a few extra breaths. "You look uncomfortable," she observed. Rowan glanced at her. A clean docking makes me nervous, he replied. Willa smiled. You prefer chaos. It gives you purpose. Rowan did not argue. Purpose was a stubborn habit. Inside the warehouse, Thane organized the restacking of grain and checked the cloth bundles. The smoky cloth had faded to a faint memory. The damp cloth had dried enough to stop threatening. Wool bales sat high with air gaps, not perfect but safe enough for now. The regrettable jar crate still lived in exile, behind Bram-constructed barrier, smelling faintly offended. Thane walked past the jar crate and paused. It still exists, Thane said. Bram nodded. It is committed to its role. Thane stared at it for a moment. If it tries to become a tradition, Thane warned, I will bury it. Elin looked at him. Do not use words like bury, she said. Edric will write it down and then someone will assume you mean something dramatic. Edric looked up from his board. I do not assume, he insisted. I record. Elin gave him a calm look. Then record this, she replied. The jar crate is simply being moved farther away from decent air. Edric wrote without comment. He looked happier when events were described in tidy terms. As afternoon approached, Osric called Rowan over to the toll post. The day was calmer now, which meant Osric had time to handle something that had been waiting behind the storm. There are delayed work payments to settle, Osric said. Rowan nodded. From the storm night. Yes, Osric replied. Dock workers who stayed late. Warehouse hands who helped spread grain. Bram who provided tar and rope beyond his usual complaining allowance. Elin who supervised. Thane who supervised too hard. Edric who wrote twice as long. Edric looked up immediately. Writing is not labour, he said defensively. Osric met his eyes. Writing is labour, Osric replied. It is just the kind that makes your hand hurt instead of your back. Edric blinked, then looked down and pretended he had not enjoyed being understood. Osric laid out small piles of coin, separated carefully. This pile for the dock workers, he said. This pile for the warehouse hands. This pile for Bram expenses. This pile for Ellen labour. This pile for the crew adjustment return. Rowan watched the piles. It looks like a small treasure, Rowan said. Osric nodded. It is, he replied. It is the treasure of not arguing later. Bram stepped closer and peered at his pile. That is less than I want, Bram observed. Osric looked at him calmly. That is equal to your listed prices and agreed extra fee, Osric replied. If you want more, raise your listed prices, but then fewer people will buy, then you will complain for a different reason. Bram stared, then sighed. Fair, Bram admitted, quietly. Elin crossed her arms. Does my pile include hazard pay for dealing with damp ambition? She asked. Osric tilted his head. It includes the agreed labour fee, he said. Damp ambition is part of the job. Elin nodded. Then I will continue complaining for free, she replied. Thane glanced at the piles. Where is the pile for the warehouse itself? Thane asked. The warehouse has suffered greatly. Rowan looked at him. The warehouse will be paid in straw and silence, Rowan replied. Thane accepted that as accurate. Osric distributed coins carefully, each hand receiving its portion, each person nodding. The harbour needed money the way it needed rope. Without it, everything loosened. Edric received a small pile for extra hours. He looked startled, then tried to hide the feeling. This is unnecessary, he muttered. Osric watched him. It is necessary, Osric replied. You like that word. Edric frowned, then tucked the coins away as if they might stain his dignity. By late afternoon the sky brightened slightly, not into blue but into a lighter grey that suggested the weather had taken a nap. The inlet reflected that lighter tone, and for a brief hour Hedeby looked almost gentle. Rowan walked the dock once more. He checked lines by habit. He tightened one knot that had loosened slightly. He touched a post and felt the rough wood, warm enough now to not sting his fingers. The calm felt real enough to borrow for a moment. Ellen stood near the warehouse door watching workers carry a dried cloth bundle to a buyer's cart. The buyer lifted the cloth, smiled and paid without complaint. That alone was a small miracle. Ellen turned to Rowan. See, she said. Sometimes it is simple. Rowan watched the cart roll away. Simple makes me uneasy, he replied. Ellen smiled. That is because you are trained by chaos, she said, like a harbour dog. Rowan considered that. Harbour dogs get fed, he replied. Elin nodded. Yes, she agreed. That is why they stay. Near evening, the lamps were lit again. The flames looked steadier tonight, less bent by wind. The harbour grew quiet in the calm way, the kind of quiet that comes when work has been done and no new trouble has yet introduced itself. Thane closed the warehouse doors and checked each latch. He did it slowly, deliberately, like a ritual. The warehouse did not sigh as much tonight. It settled, it accepted. Osric packed his scales and weights, wrapping them in cloth and tying the bundle neatly. The scales went into their case like a truth being put to bed. Edric stacked the day pages, sealed them with wax using the stamp that had tried to hide under the bench, and smiled faintly at the clean imprint. He looked peaceful for one whole breath. Bram returned to his shed and counted rope coys again, muttering less angrily, which meant the world had improved. He paused by the door and looked back at the harbour. If the wind stays calm, Bram said, I will start suspecting it. Willa walked up beside Rowan, not running, just walking, hands tucked in her sleeves. So, she said, we survived damp cloth, smoky cloth, fog boats, cracked crates, missing pages, missing stamps, and grain that tried to become a story. Rowan looked out at the inlet. We survived, he agreed. For now. Willa smiled. That is all Hedeby ever promises. Rowan stood a moment longer, watching the lamps reflect on dark water, watching boats rock gently, watching people move like quiet shadows between buildings. The harbour at the edge of the world was not truly the edge, but at night it felt like it. A boundary between water and land, between work and rest, between problems and the short pauses between them. Then Rowan turned toward home. Thane locked the last door. Osric carried the scale case away. Elin gathered her cloth scraps. Bram shut his shed. Edric held his sealed packet like a small victory. Hedeby exhaled, just once, and pretended it was asleep.